I'm going to kick off actually by talking about something you shared, Madelon, was your first drawing about the creative, first drawing about the creative process, and the kind of a kind of languid period followed by a period of tearful panic and then creativity. And I wondered actually if...
Did you all redo all by Friday? While Friday? When you have a deadline?
I wanted to get a sense from all of you what your creative process is like as a journey, and whether you recognise that or which bit you feel most creative in.
Switch off.
So we have to share too. Can you go on?
I think the recognition of the long, is it yellow, the long period?
Red.
Where you do nothing.
The fuck off period.
Yeah, fuck off period. I suppose in my slides I showed how we try to, okay. In my slides I sort of talked about how in a design process you do have, how do you make that territory? How do you make the fuck off period if you're expected to go for fortnightly meetings about nothing because the project manager's called the meeting? How do you make that territory of the finding out without having to think about what you're doing? And so I think, as I hope I presented, there are different ruses. For example, you start a long project by doing the proposal there's nothing to talk about element, which makes a territory for making the next stage. So I suppose there's lots of techniques, but I think there is many, in the history of architecture, people have talked about the labour of buildings, and in labour, like having children, the moment of transition, there's a moment of transition, which is the moment when the baby's about to come out. And it's the moment when you say, I can't. Somebody else can say, you're already doing it. So I think it's that moment of panic, of tears, is that, interestingly enough, whoever made the analogy between architecture and labour, because I don't suspect it was a woman, actually kind of got it right about that moment. And the joy of a good teacher or good friends is at the point when you say, I can't, it's too late, I haven't got any time. That's the kind of moment when you are producing. So basically I just agree with Madelon. That's my position. I agree with you, yeah.
This is becoming now the quest.
Do you agree with yourself? Do you agree with yourself?
But don't you always have that when you have more time, that you do everything else? You think, I do this first, I do that first, I do that first, and then you put it off
Till it's really late and you have to stay up nights.
Yeah, well, I guess I would put off doing the tasks I have to do, and by putting that off, I go and draw, so no one knows I'm doing it. So don't have to tell them to fuck off.
Yeah. But that's why you're so amazed when you then make a beautiful model.
Yes.
You're like, oh, look what I did. So Nigel goes off to secretly make work when he's supposed to be doing something else, so that then he takes care of it. He can bring it back when needed.
Like doing those models were done over the weekend when no one was in the studio.
Right, no,
Sorry. Wish we had one each.
I know. Sorry.
What do you think?
Sid.
Well, we have another word for fuck face. It's the pain face. And pain, because it's really painful to be in that stage where you don't know and it's chaotic and you have pressure on and so on. But I think it's interesting that we learn to go along with that pain. Like we even learn to like it somehow. And of course we can be more and more strategic.
They all say you can use them together.
And I think it's also that some people, without having anything to do with creativity, they've been studying us being in these stages and kind of taken out knowledge. And they even, there exists a theory where you go down in this bottom of the U, which I would say is the ultimate pain stage. And they call it the transformative stage, where you are, in fact, you have the possibility of transcend a limit or do something that you never thought you should do. And I think that's what we all try to achieve sometimes. That we want to invent something which is not existing, and that's where you have to be in this chaotic zone.
So the bit of it that's the most creative.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the Drawing Matter archive, online archive, product placement. Now, in the Drawing Matter archive, or thinking of, say, Alvaro Siza's drawings, where he draws everything. He draws the coffee he's drinking, the place he's sitting, and the proposals, the designs that he's thinking about, and the keeping drawing to make that space of the long period of doing everything but the thing you're supposed to do is a way for things to simmer. But to simmer without either both you knowing about it, or in the case of Nigel, the rest of the office. Because that is the irony, I think, of getting older when other people work with you and for you, is you find yourself working in secret. It's a strange, it's a strange thing.
I'd like to chuck something else in there, which is the battle that you have as a creative being with what you're drawing. And I'm not quite sure why we've all harped on about drawing, because it's not the only...
Is that what Will told us to do?
Well, it's design directions. It doesn't necessarily mean that you design through making drawings. In fact, Maddie showed lots of paper things as well as drawing. Anyway, what I wanted to add is that it can be quite an exasperating and yet rewarding battle, pleasure, to put down ideas and then develop those, and they might develop really poorly. You might think, God, that's shit. I'm really doing it wrong. I'm approaching the conversations that you have in your head with any design process that is kind of within the bubble of your own being is a kind of conversation with yourself and with what you draw. Just like maybe at certain moments one wants to spread those out and share ideas with others, and that too can be a battle and can be creative and can be a pleasure. So there is, the thing is a kind of, as you said, is a child trying to be born, but it often is really, really tough to get there, but incredibly rewarding when you get that rush of feeling you've actually done something you didn't think you could do.
I think that's also...
I think that you have in your brain, you have lots of rooms of this different consciousness. And I think your hand, when you're drawing, taps into a certain room of consciousness. And I think sometimes your hand starts to draw, you think, independently.
What, like in Sib's drawings? They look as though they're drawing themselves.
Yes. No. So I think that's why I'm very worried that people don't draw enough and that they're too much with computers and make beautiful computer images and not having this connection hand-brain and unconscious brain. Because you have to tap into that. While you're drawing, you start to think and your hand starts to think.
Or your mind starts to wander in controlled ways.
Exactly.
I mean, picking up on something Nigel said about you do something and it's not very good. All of you have highly subjective ways of working that are very personal, and I wonder how you have developed your own critical judgment to say, actually, that isn't. Do you reach a point where it's like that's brilliant, or that's great, or that's finished? How do you know when it's reached the right point?
It tells you.
You recognize it
Immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you
Because you've done versions where you've actually gone over and put too much on it. And I remember when my dad was teaching me to draw, and he was fantastic at drawing, but he was a scientist. So for him, the objective of a drawing was to make something that looked like the real thing, But he'd go on working at it and working at it until he spoiled it. And I'd say, Dad, you've ruined it.
Yeah, but one of the most important things is then where to stop. It's true.
So you have to make that mistake several times enough to be able to kind of recognise it when it's cooked.
Are there any questions from the audience?
€10.
They have to pay us.
Katie.
Hi, I just wondered, all of you showed particular kind of trajectories of work that took a particular medium, and whether it was a line drawing or in cardboard modelling or whatever. And I just wondered, in that kind of linear creative process of different stages, how much you think you can kind of compress or expand those different stages by just switching medium, and what the role is of switching from the drawing to the model, or from the detail stage right back, zooming out to the kind of master plan type level, and how you deal with the scale and medium to try and sort of morph, change, and push on from one stage to the next.
It's about critical awareness, isn't it? I mean, that you have to do auto-critical awareness. So instead of someone else telling you that you've got to change medium or go and look again at the site or kind of come at it from a different angle, you've got to develop that ability yourself of not just keep hammering away at the same thing over and over and over without knowing that it's leading nowhere, that you need to change tack.
I was just quite interested in the fact that all of you seem to show one medium, and I want more of a kind of leaning towards a particular medium, and so I was wondering whether that's true.
I really like to mix them up.
I think we work with all kind of mediums to realize a building. I mean, you cannot stay with one. I mean, but I think we can develop a certain skill in one medium that we might not do it all, because that has to do with it deepening the contact with that medium, and I think that for some it's possible to choose one and go that way.
But for architects, it's much more simple to, because it's a model. There's some people who don't understand drawings, so some people have to make models to make people understand what they're talking about. And we saw Philip Johnson, who only made models, and he actually had the models under his desk, and then he said, "No, I want it like this." And he shoved some buildings to the side. He's actually designed with his foot. But I mean, in my case, I always had to look at where I had a show, and in the beginning, in the AA show, I just thought I had to fill this room. Can't do just these drawings. So when the people came to my house to see what they wanted me to have an exhibition. I never had a solo exhibition, and it was Shimon, and he came with a friend Stefan, and I said, "There's nothing. You can't show anything. There's nothing here." And he said, "Yes, we'll take your whole studio." So they packed everything up and took them. So then I had to fill another room, and I thought, okay, I will have to fill it. So I make big models of the mind game, and I make people play the mind game in the top floor. So it was just that I looked, and every time when I went to an exhibition space, I looked at the space, and then you look what you can do there, and whether you have to expand or make it smaller. So every time the exhibition shrunk or expanded.
But that is an answer, given that today is designed as with a pedagogical idea that this is a kind of fast way of teaching lots of people at once, very old-fashioned, isn't it? The lecture model rather than something more intimate is, Madeline's story is a good one and answers your question, because this notion of contingency, of responding with the right thing to the moment of that requirement, yes, which in that case was both the deadline and a space of the right thing for that space. And so a mode of panic is to produce the model but actually the making of the model might be the wrong model to make at that time, and you might never use the model because you might put your 4 weeks into building a topography, which actually if you just stood in the place and watched a ball roll down a hill, you'd have worked out was steep, and you could have made your response, and the right model would have been the model which bridged that change in level. So try not to be too panicked at the beginning of Madelon's diagram, to just think, oh, I've got to produce, or I've got to start making a site model where my end proposal will be that small, and I haven't made that end where I can articulate, you'll be able to see it across London. You know, try to make some false artificial deadlines or limits that then you can make that kind of contingent response. And of course the response when she says, oh, I just had to do something, she doesn't really mean that, because she was drawing on that whole body of stuff and finding what it was the right thing to put into that situation. So to give yourself multiple little deadlines and multiple constraints to react to can be a way of doing the shift, rather than thinking, oh, time for a model now.
But sometimes I think you're undertaking a task, and you say, I'm going to go through this process and I'm going to do 30 drawings, bang, 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 and then halfway through and I think of something else. And I think, oh, that's right, I can do, when I finish this, I can do that, which is something to look forward to. It's a game.
I think there is also something with the deciding that what one is doing is becoming something in itself, so that you get the response to it. I think we work very much with transitional documents and printing out, and it's like endless. You don't do something which you really look at and learn something from, and that is about investing a kind of precision and attention and consciousness to it, and deciding that it's actually an event. It can be a prototype. You can go out and do something in the park and start, or you do a drawing, but it's a drawing that is something. You learn something from it.
There was another question over Tila. Okay, you go first.
Yeah. In current day and age, technology is even very fast-paced, and with that, the use of space in buildings change even more faster. How does the narrative architecture cater for that change of use of building and spaces? And also, how does that relate to cultural rootedness, or is it relevant at all?
Was that specifically for Nigel?
Yes, and
Say it again.
when things change, usage change quickly, hot desking.
Oh yeah. Well, are we talking about the result of the narrative architecture, or the way of doing it?
Result of it. The output of the narrative architecture comes out with product and.
Well, one of the things I tried to stress was that the city's never finished, that it's a constant building site. So there's your answer. It can adapt, and I think adaptation is fantastic, but not necessarily in a do-goody or problem-solving way. Maybe sometimes it can change in a questioning or inappropriate way. It all depends on the way you're looking at it. And I think architecture should ask questions as well as answer them. And also, Mandy talked about metaphor and how we use metaphor all the time. And I suppose what I'm interested in is the way that phenomena in the city can be interpreted in a metaphoric way. And I'll give you an example that relates to Vauxhall. In Vauxhall, there are some animals. There's actually a place called a zoo, and there's an enclosure for equestrian, for riding. And in my working process, I picked that up and thought, oh, there's a whole story about animals which I should play out. And I haven't really finished that part yet. But I think that that's a way of working as a designer that is similar to the way that children think. It's similar to the way that ordinary people perceive the city. They notice things that aren't necessarily architectural, but they're spatial, they occur around them. You know, the fried chicken shop, the church that's been boarded up, the gay pub on the corner, whatever it happens to be, there's a surge of symbols and effects that we're bombarded with. So I think as an architect, what you ought to do is be able to engage with that way of experiencing the city and incorporate that into how you design. That's what I mean by narrative. But what kills me is when there are research projects like the ones at the Royal College of Art there was one called Design Age. And the idea was that you, as architects, had to design houses which are going to suit everybody, however old they are. So they're kind of condemning of people to live in the same bloody house all their lives until they're being pushed around in a wheelchair. So that kind of thing is not responsive, really. That's just kind of dull. And architecture should be rich and variable, and actually appeal to our many different kinds of pleasure. I mean, all of us in this room have different ideas of what is valuable. So, and I get that from Liza's public spaces, that the public spaces are not meant to answer the problem of public space. They're meant to suggest different things to different people, because they're not quite coherent. The same with Maddie's rooms. They're not coherent. In fact, people want to move the objects. That's the point. So I haven't quite answered the question.
It's a good
around the houses
I think
a bit.
it's a good question. I mean, maybe it's a difference between narrative and anecdote. So if we see in the so-called kind of loose working spaces of tech spaces, which are anecdotal to freedom in their bit of grass and a bit of something else, I don't see those as narrative. Those are not narratives, rather they're anecdotes of a fantasy that somebody's applied there. Whereas the idea that there's real pleasures when you see buildings misused or used in different ways for different times, and so bathhouses becoming offices where you can still see, that somebody can walk up the diving board and actually escape from everyone else. That a degree of specificity and accuracy allows for appropriation. And so I think if the narratives are strong enough, they will actually be more multi-purpose than any fake flexibility of a particular type of multi-grey carpet, which doesn't quite show any stain, isn't really flexible.
Thank you.
When I first came to London, one sentence only, sorry. When I first came to London, I went to live in North London. There was a church there. And the church doors opened, and I thought all these devoted people would come out, and there was a car. It was a garage.
What was your question?
Hi. Each of the design directions that were presented seemed to be quite personal in a way, and I was wondering how, if you're working in a team, in a collective, how do you use it as a tool for designing in everyday sort of practice life?
Well, that's sort of...
That was going to be my
That's
my
kind
spare
of what's
question.
happened tomorrow, isn't it? We're going to be doing workshops tomorrow. Are you going to be part of that tomorrow? No. Oh, well, perhaps you should be a special guest.
Maybe just be a special guest, yeah.
Because although we talked about individual approaches, I think you can expand those approaches, and teaching in a group is often. I mean, I've taught a lot and done the same kind of thing with the various people in the group pitching in and critiquing each other's work, and the maelstrom of working together being even more exciting than do it on your own. So it's not, you say it's personal. Yes, it is. But that was kind of what we were asked to do today.
I'm also a bit eager to prove that maybe it's not personal, it's subjective. And I think we should be even more subjective. at the same time as we get more collective, we have to train those two, because we can't just become collective. We have to deliver something or contribute with what is unique with each one of us. But it shouldn't be egoistic or imposing. It should be open to always reflect and resonate with the collective. So by knowing your personal strength, or individual or subjective, you could go into that, but it's also about knowing what you can contribute to it.
Sid, when you did your, you showed a drawing of a table with a problem and you tried to resolve it through drawing, and the table, I can't remember what you called it. Did that work? How did that?
Yeah, that was a collective drawing, in fact. We were sitting and trying to draw the problem, and we found out that it was a problem of a meeting with too many people and people not knowing.
Too many people drawing.
No, the people are not drawing, they were just sitting there. So the solution, yes, was to make a table of 6 with where we know what to do, and we were actually drawing in the meeting. And it solved the problem that time.
The word subjective was a good one, but I think you can share the giving value to the precision of, say, observation. You know, it doesn't have, if you have a group, it's not as if one take is the only take, because the world is sufficiently complicated that if one person tunes in to the effect of wind hurtling down a nearby building and someone else picks up on the Holstone, you know, between them, this is data which can be marked. And I think what it does is, if you give value to the first reading of a site in a studio, in an office, it gives permission for everybody to bring what they understand of a situation and makes a project richer. So I think it's not that it's one truth, but it's a way of doing something which can be shared and repeated.
Is there any questions from over this side?
From the quiet side.
Which I haven't looked at
Yeah.
yet. Okay. Let's go for you first and then you.
For Liza primarily, but how do you decide what's the difference between contribution and participation?
How do I decide? It has to endlessly be questioned, you know? I mean, like, we come to I think that it'd been better if we hadn't ever worked around the Olympic site. So I think sometimes you can only make those decisions at the end when you look, and then you think, oh, don't be so hard on yourself, you know, at least that school, at least you spent the Olympic money on that school playground, so at least that was done. So I think it's always this ordering and questioning and dark night of the soul, you know, just if you are so foolhardy to say that you want to make a contribution rather than want to make money, then you have to continually, you know, both offer your work up for critique and also, you know, revisit it, learn from it, you know, you know, and stay awake, a kind of wakefulness. If you're in my group, I look forward to us checking it out tomorrow. And if you're not, I won't have to.
And then the next question.
I just kind of leads on a bit from that, but I was kind of wondering, in relation to your systemic agency and Liza, the sort of notion of not getting fired initially, you all have quite strong agendas within your work. Is there like a time and a place for pushing that and a time for not? Do you have a strategy for like how to push your agenda while also creating a market for your work so you do not fire all the time?
No, but she said it applied to everybody.
Oh.
No. Do we have a conscious strategy? No.
Sort of how do you take risks when?
You react to circumstances, don't you?
Well, I mean, Nigel knows about.
I just said you react to circumstances. You know, you kind of a lot of designing is to do with agility. You know, like if you're playing football, you can't just stand there like a lump. You've actually got to be ready to move.
Yeah.
And the same applies to architects. You can't just be like a lump and expect it to do it itself. You've actually got to tickle it and tease it and stroke it. and seduce it.
We
And
definitely
treat it
learned
like
that
a
too.
creature.
Yeah, we learned too late, I think, of when not to make completely visible our frustration with situations. Yeah, I can give you a list. We got 2 lists of projects. There's a list of projects we managed to get ourselves sacked from, but maybe, I don't know, with the, if we'd not
But you
got sacked
managed to
from the
turn
dome.
getting sacked into an art form.
Yeah.
No, Nigel and I shared working on the dome, and with the dome we looked back on our invoices after we'd been sacked and saw that for 5 months they stopped saying design and said PR. So they actually paid us for 5 months and didn't sack us. So I suppose that's the art form bit of it.
That's the strategy.
Yeah. That's
we
my
were
answer.
we were called contractors, weren't we, at the time?
Yeah, not designers.
Not designers or architects, we were contractors.
Sid, do you want to pick up on that question?
I don't know if I understood it right, but I think to be engaged in the conditions that we work in, or try to create them or initiate them, and be try to take more responsibility for the roles we play is, I think that's something that's the future. We have to do that. We can't really just become architects delivering on a contract anymore. We have to engage in what that contract is, and yeah.
I think to answer your question, actually, it's a good question. I think it's by making parallel briefs. So there can be the thing you've been asked to do, and the thing that you find as being the relevant thing to do in that situation. And you probably just have just enough of the thing that you're asked to do till you've built up the argument of the thing that you think is better to do and that you can bring to the table. So, for example, making the drawings of where the shadows fell then turned into us drawing every single planning application that had been made for the area and drawing where the shadows fell at the same time as actually talking to the person who owned the building, which in the first drawing had been knocked down, etc., to build up the detail, which in master planning tends to be lost, in the thickness of the felt pen. So those strategies are in that, period of Madeleine's drawing. Is you don't just lie in bed. You're also having to gather a proper understanding of the situation. So no cop-outs, is there?
I think one strategy is to always question the brief you get and always try to tell them how they can improve what they ask from you. Because most people don't really know what you can do and what you're thinking. Huh?
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions down here?
Do it afterwards.
I wish to ask Nigel, you said about artists need to have agility. And I wonder, we've spoken a lot about drawings, but I would like to talk about other qualities that architects and designers have to have. Whether you see what you see as a kind of core competency, or what am I using?
God, there's so many things, and we're told that you have to be good at running a business, you have to be adept at law, you have to understand the economy, politics, be nice to people.
Smile.
Listen to people, be a good listener, that's kind of really, really important. You have to read a lot. You have to kind of travel. You have to, I've said this before, you have to be an adventurer. Go where others have not trod. And be prepared to find out the unfindable. Just be kind of courageous, I guess. Because if you're just going to be a job's worth architect, I think there are plenty of those already in the world. And they probably bore me and probably bore everyone else. What you're looking for, I'm looking for in another architect is a different viewpoint, something I haven't thought about, a pathway to seeing something special. So looking and being open-minded, I think, is kind of key.
I think it's key is to stay wild and be able to weave yourself into whatever situation you are kind of confronted with.
And the weaving.
Yeah, that's fine.
Question anyway. What
It
should
was
we
like,
do?
what, beyond drawing, what is it that what is the kind of key bit that you do?
I think to be, what did you say, wash up? I think this thing of just being wakeful, and maybe the late answer to that idea of changing your medium, is that if you find yourself getting stuck, it's probably because you have to look what's missing from that situation. Thank you so much, Will. Bye.
No.
Is that the last question?
No, I want any final question from the audience. We've had you. Is there anyone else? Lily.
Nigel, you just mentioned all the roles that architects have to have, and I wonder how we have to be all these different people, but also have time to play, and how you make.
Well, that's what today has been about, really.
Play all the time.
Yes.
You need time to do serious work. Play is always.
But that's part of this program, isn't it? Today we are being asked to kind of open our stall, and tomorrow, for those participants, are being asked to do something special within the framework of the whole year. I don't think there are going to be any kind of epiphanies tomorrow.
There could be quite a few.
Well, I'd be pleased.
There could be one or two. Agree.
Rather than epiphany, maybe an experience that we won't forget. I don't know. Last year I did a workshop with some students, any of you in the room, that we did the vegetable city planning, which I had no clue what was going to happen that day, and it didn't really, nor did anyone else. But everyone turned up with basketfuls of carrots and cabbage and God knows what else, and we made a city out of vegetables. And it felt at the end of the day that we'd all done something positive and experienced and found something that we wouldn't have found individually. So, who knows what's happening tomorrow. I, for one, would like to get together with my little gang, because I've got a list of things that I'd like you to bring, none of which are very surprising. It's not going to be vegetables. But I don't know if
we can do that.
Yeah.
Andrew, you had a question.
Oh yeah. You all kind of spoke about weaving together different people in different ways. Like Nigel, you were kind of saying that it's boring to try and create something for everyone, so maybe you have to be more specific. Or like Lisa with the
I didn't say that.
Different interpretations. Well, okay, the way different people interpret situations, and maybe designing for the unexpected or the unknown. And I don't know how that can make something future-proof. For someone's asking about adaptability, but how you kind of design for these interactions. Unknown.
Well, the limit of when other people start to inhabit it.
Yeah.
Do you mean how it can adapt during the process of development or after, when the users are taking over?
I guess just like how designing for interactions between people in the space. I don't know, your kind of interpretation.
Well, I would like to answer in a way that it's interesting to see the whole, when you work with a project, it's can be between 1 and 10 years before it's realized. So it's a long period, and even during that process, we should, or I think we are obliged to find design that can stand in the development, which means that it can take iterations, it can take feedback, it can include things that comes along the way. If not, you will be completely frustrated. At least that's our strategy. We have to find tools, or design as a tool that can guide us in that development process and that can be adaptable. And I think you can study spatial organization that is adaptable or not. You can go into compositions that are adaptable or not. So it's also something to learn what kind of spatial organizations are more adaptable.
It depends what kind of architect you are. Like Nina Bombardi did this center for cultural center for 10 years, and she was there every day. She came in until the people probably said, "Oh my God, there she is again." and she would say, they would say, well, we make that wall very nice and flat, and she would say, no, it's beautiful with the sticking cement sticking out of the bricks. Leave it. So every time she came and inspired people and was involved with people working there, and that is the best kind of architecture. I think that you adapt it while you're working at it, and you think, no, that's not necessary. That's why I don't believe in this post-mortem architecture, where the architect has died and they start to build like this thing was it Glasgow? Where was it, in Edinburgh?
Scottish Parliament.
Yeah.
The Parliament. Yeah. I mean, that is a building. For me, it's a post-modern.
I thought he died midway through it.
No,
Did he not?
he died halfway. He died before it was finished.
He started.
He started it. But I think if he had seen the rooms that I had seen, where you knock your head on the thing, and if he had seen it, he would have changed some things. You have to go to a building and all the time see what they're doing and think, well, obviously this didn't work.
Which is really problematic with design-build contracts.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you know, in the case of many of our projects, they are design-build contracts, and it's then just charm. You know, all you have is charm that you're allowed to carry on with the conversation that you began at the beginning. But also, I think this notion about a sort of fluid, multi-purpose, adaptable. There's some things that are just true, like, say, the height to sit on something comfortably. You know, there's a kind of there's a known range, and handily that is the same height that is perfect for a plinth or catwalk without having to produce a railing. So there's some things which are known to be able to be open to appropriation, and there's other things where sheer accuracy, so in the case of the last project, the Outer Valley Park project, the profile of a church which no longer existed because it had been bombed, happened to be positioned and added to, so it became a route, and in turn became the route to the ceremony that happens at midnight on the 21st of February. So the idea of, there are a few rules, you know, there are some certainties, like water falls off a slope. You know, there's some things with a degree of precision, and that then can be layered, and then open to a joyful misuse. So yeah, it's not.
I just want to be sure that I haven't left you with the idea that you just go mad and do whatever you like. That wasn't the point. In fact, it's made me remember what I was talking about earlier. I had these three words: place, use, and narrative. Place and use both refer to given situations outside yourself. And if you don't look at the place well enough, but decide that the place doesn't matter, that's not going to produce a great outcome. But also the imagination, surely. If you want people to be stimulated and responsive in a place that you're designing, surely you don't just want to make it so adaptable and so bland as a result that it can suit everything for everybody. I don't think that's the kind of place that London is. London is not Paris, where everything is kind of late 18th century, 19th century, all uniform with all the roofs the same height. London is a mishmash. And I think that certainly these two ladies and myself have proposed a mishmash, a kind of controlled mishmash, as being a positive, because it doesn't formulate the answers, because it encourages people to be drawn to one path or another path, or interpret things in their own way. A bit like a good film, or a little bit like, you know, that the meaning may not be absolutely kind of set down in stone. The meaning would be different for different viewers. And I think it's really important that as a sort of little practice in today and tomorrow, that we are trying to find a way that the imagination can be harnessed in the cause of being responsive to a specific place with real earth and real drains and real people and new functions. They're kind of pragmatic. It's kind of the balance between the imagination and the pragmatic is key.
I think that's a brilliant thought to end on. Thank you very much. Thank you.